a guy who used to work at the paper I worked for, who took a buyout, was now the editor in chief over at this other place, a weekly. He said, "Come on over, let's talk." So he gets me in there, and we're having coffee, and he says, I think I've read the same books you have. We're about the same age. And we started bouncing off what books we'd read when we were kids and that type of thing. And by golly, yeah, we had a similar background. He says, "I'm sympathetic." He says, "I can't write this column because I'm the editor in chief, but you can. I'll try you out for a month." I gave him 5 articles to go. And about a month later, he calls me up, and he's got this tone like the Dread Pirate Roberts on The Princess Bride. "I'll most likely kill you in the morning" kind of tone. And I get over there. I'm 10 minutes late for the meeting. The parking lot's all torn up. I get in there. He's talking to the columnists. They're all wrapped around the big conference table, and he stops. He looks over, sees me, points at me, and says, "There's our rock star." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You've been here a month, and on an online edition, you're pulling more page views than all the columnists combined. Keep doing it." So they had several layoffs sometime after that. They sat me down and said, "Don't worry, you're not going anywhere." And so I wrote my column for the next 7 years until they closed the doors.
Which, I mean, that has to be a relief, honestly. Go from being not able to publicly talk about something you enjoy to now being able to publicly talk about it. And then,
yeah.
And then the next, layer on top of it, getting some notoriety and some, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything good that comes from the UFO community.
Well, the conferences were a lot of fun. Think of them as a little paid vacation every once in a while in some cool place, That was a lot of fun. And the magazine or the newspaper looked at it as a prestige point. The first time there was a page 2 in the printed edition, and that was always taken by the editor. And here's this one day, he's got a picture of himself there, and he says, "Do you know that the hottest column in our newspaper isn't in print?" And he was talking about the online edition. And then he added, he says, Cheryl Costa is going to speak at convention in a week. And the next thing we know, we're picking up more and more of these speaking gigs with these UFO conventions. And we came out with our first book of statistics in 2017. And when 2019 rolled around, I was booked someplace every 2 weeks for the entire year. And that's before we did not know about COVID.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Because suddenly it was like we hit a concrete wall at the end of 2019. But it was that was a wild year. In fact, the goofy thing. This is a girl talk thing. I had a set of clothes that I thought would be comfortable for the conference. I would go to a conference. I would come back. They'd be all sweaty. I would run them through the wash. I'd press them up, fold them up, put them back in the suitcase. So if you took a look at me at any conference that year, it seemed like it was always the same conference because I wore the same set of clothes all year long.
I always joke about the people that have paparazzi following them around. I'm like, they should wear the same outfit all the time, and then nobody would know when the picture was from. So here you are, living proof that.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the other reason I did that, because all these people want to take pictures of you, and I didn't want to I had all these outfits balanced for that kind of pictures,
Yeah.
So that worked out very well. The other thing I did was, because I'm a trans person, and I'm in a lady and lady marriage. We had, as researchers, had a lot of people yell at us and scream at us. First thing, it was like they didn't know who the heck we were. It seems like we fell out of the sky when we published our first statistics book. Who the hell are they? Are they field investigator? What the heck? Oh my God, they're gay. Oh, they can't be doing UFO research. And we heard all this stuff. So I added 4 extra slides to the beginning of my presentation after the title slide. And I said, I want to show you who I am. I showed a picture of me in combat gear in Vietnam. I showed a picture of me in a nice dark navy uniform with a big Paul Bunyan submarine beard. And then I showed a nice, lovely glamour shot. I said, that's who I had been. This is who I really wanted to be. And this is who I am. And here's Linda and me jumping over the broom at our wedding, and I stepped front and center on the stage and said, guys, if you can't handle us, you will never deal with ET.
And did that clench some of that or quell some of that?
I thought I was afraid I was going to get ashtrays thrown at me, from the, I got a house of 600 people, right? No, actually I got a number of standing ovations. I was really shocked to get.
So we mentioned that, I don't know if we mentioned this now or in the pre-show, but you finished 50 UFO books, one for each state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A, why one for each state? And B, are you crazy? No.
Yes, I'm crazy.
Okay.
No, actually, I've been through 2 full sets of psychologicals, one paid for by the Defense Department that said a perfectly healthy woman took this test. So I'm quite sane. So I've got a letter on the wall that says that, and so I've got a letter that says I'm saying, what do you got?
My letter says I've got a screw loose, or at least one. No.
There you go. Okay, what the deal was, when we did the pink book back, this is the 2001 to 2020 statistics desk reference book. We made it pink because people in 2019, the usual suspects, the lobby guys down in DC, told us that Rubio was going to put a bill in with some kind of continuing spending package, and he was it was going to pass with that, and they were going to have congressional hearings maybe in 2020 or 2021. Of course, again, we didn't know COVID was coming. And so they said, you girls are the only ones that have ever done the statistics. Not even Project Blue Book did this stuff. So we said, okay. So they said, will you testify before Congress if they called you? I said, we were contractors. You're supposed to work your whole career not to have to testify before Congress, right?
I was going to say, I don't think that normally goes over too well.
No. So we said, sure, okay, fine. So we get off the air and or get off the phone, so to speak. Linda and I were talking, and I said, well, imagine it. We're having dinner, and I said, imagine it. We're on C-SPAN. They got the congressional hearings up there. It's going to look like Jim Bassett's citizen hearings or something, and there's going to be guys up there flipping through these books and things. We want them to know that book was done by women, right? And she says, yeah. So we decided to make the cover bright pink. You can flag an aircraft with this thing, okay? And so that was the plan. Now, the other question that had come up, especially since we did the original book that was a 2001 to 2015 statistical study that came out in 2017, people said we could only go to the state and the county level. And people said, when are you going to go down to like my city's level, the village level, or something like this? So COVID comes along. We got nothing better to do, all dressed up, no place to go. And so one day I was sitting there and I said, well, let's start getting ready for the 2020 book. You got to wait till the end of 2020 to do it. And so I ran a report of what we thought we would like to do in the form of a PDF. And it going down to the city level would have been 6,500 pages. It would have been 3 Oxford dictionaries deep. Nobody's going to, I can't print it like that, and nobody's going to buy a thing like that, okay? So we said maybe we have to do something else. The other problem we found is that in the database, 3.5% of the database, which worked out to be about 6,000 lines of entries, didn't enter a city. And if they did enter something, they said something like, my boss told me not to tell you. The sheriff told me not to tell you. My husband told me not to tell you where we live. Or the more colorful one was, I'm in a village of 12 houses. If I file this, everybody will know it's me. That kind of attitude. The other thing we discovered, 7.5%, another 12,000 records, they didn't spell the name of their city right. Okay.
Well, that's awkward at best, but go on. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking
And it,
about.
it can't run spell check against it. And or the other problem, it was either case issues or they like put an extra space in the beginning before they typed the first letter. Um, there was mixed case versus straight case. You know, it was all this stuff. Plus, there was the other major problem in this group of ones that they would say, yes, UFO, okay, Jasper, Wyoming, next to Joe's gas station or Joe's Pizza. You can't sort on anything like that. And I was an IT manager. I'm going, oh Jesus, what am I going to do here? You know, so it was the middle of August 2020, and we realized if we were going to go down to the village level, we were going to have to clean that up. Okay. So to the whole database for essentially, and make sure the right counties are with the right states and with the right cities and things. You know, so we got a golden mail list. We brought the database down into spreadsheet form, got them into columns, got a golden mail list, aligned the columns so that they would merge, and then sorted them in. They were colored. Okay, we made that database light blue, and mixed it in with the other database and sorted it by state and by city. And then if we saw a city spelled wrong, we fixed it. If we saw the county was wrong, we fixed it. You know, but it was an effort of anywhere from 500 to 1,200 lines a day. It took. I was back. It was like going back to work at Lockheed. I was working 35 hours a week, 5 days a week. It took 850 hours to do this correction effort. But while we were at it, we added the golden mail list had lat longitude, had zip codes, that kind of stuff. So we added lat longitude and zip codes and things like that. And I am so glad I did. Not so much for lat longitude, but for zip code. We have uncovered so many secrets based on zip codes of where the UFOs are, stuff nobody knew. So,
I was just wondering that as you were going through all these details, do we have any clear patterns or things that?
Oh yeah, big time. Okay, let me say it this way. Let me first say this: there are 5 drivers and there are 5 influencers. Drivers happen every state. Influencers not every state. It's only certain states. So, okay, people before we did our books would say UFOs. Oh, Cheryl, that's driven by population. More eyes on the sky. Big cities. You plot the dots. They're all around the big cities. Okay. We found out that isn't necessarily true. Give an example. When our white book came out, people said to us, "Wait a minute. How can Texas be number 3 and Florida number 2? Because Texas has twice the population of Florida, or has Florida." And we figured out that it was driven by, it had the influencer of bodies of water. Florida had 1,200 miles of coastline. Texas had 400. Okay. The other issue, we found out that there was a difference between the latitudes. States up in the northern states, they had a thing, it's a very flat line from month to month, except for a peak between June, July, and August, warmer weather. Moved down to the middle level states. Linda discovered this. Moved down to the middle level states, it was essentially statistically flat, but there was a smaller peak and the bottom baseline came up. Got down to the deep south states, and it was statistically flat, but it had a dip in the summer months because it's too bloody hot to be outside. We're talking like South Florida, Texas, Georgia, the states along those latitudes. So temperate weather was a driver. Leisure time is a driver, okay? Because we discovered at leisure time, hand in hand with hours of darkness, that 68 to 75% of the sightings occur between about 6 o'clock at night and 11:30, with the bulk of it between 8:30 and 10:30 at night. The other 16 hours a day, from 1 o'clock in the morning to 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, only represented about 25% of the sightings. Nobody knew this before. Okay. And then the other driver is observer access to broadband. We found there were 3,135 counties in the United States. 3,030 of them had UFO reports over the 20-year period of the book, 2001 to 2020, and 105 counties in the United States did not report UFOs. We went and took a look at what those counties were. They were all rural. They were usually poor rural counties, and they had a serious liking for rural broadband. So broadband is a driver. You got to be able to report them. Okay. Now, the influencers were proximity to water, and the next two were found by my colleague in upstate New York, Tom Conwell. He's a paranormal guy.
Yeah, talked to Tom before.
Tom's great.
Yeah.
And he took our white book. He put a big map of the United States on a wall, destroyed the wall because he was sticking these top hat pins into it, right? But he discovered that the UFOs were tracking with toxic ecosystems. They're very interested in our waste areas. And if you talk to Ray Hernandez from, Beyond UFOs with the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, the people who were abductees, the abductees, the experiencers, ET's really cool. And they told us to take care of our planet. They're very interested in our waste and polluted areas. Now, when I say polluted areas, I am not saying that they hang out around the 55 nuclear power plants. Everybody asks me that. Nuclear power plants are not generally dirty, okay? But, and I've got the address for all 55 of them down to the zip code, and the sighting numbers are just not there. But they are interested in the brownfields, the toxic cleanup level places, toxic cleanup fund type places, very polluted rivers, very polluted lakes. Okay, dead coal mines, dead oil fields, dead strip mines, all that kind of stuff. They are extremely interested in our waste areas. Okay, and he found this out. And then he also said that they track along geological faults. Now, last summer, we had all those earthquakes in South Carolina. South Carolina, ranking-wise, is only about number 26 for sightings in the country. But every time I heard on the radio, there was they just had another earthquake in South Carolina, and they'd usually say what county it was in. And I pulled up the database, took a quick look, and every major county that had earthquakes had major sighting spikes. So there's that. And then there's this thing called high media reports. Blue Book found this out, but they thought it was like a copycat thing. Say you had a sighting on Monday and it was reported in the paper on Tuesday and Wednesday. There would be a whole slug of additional sightings in that location on like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And Blue Book thought it was copycat people trying to get publicity or notoriety or something like this. But we discovered by looking at National UFO Reporting Center on hot one-day flap type things like that, we found out, and we're talking like a flap day where a state place that only has maybe 2 sightings a month suddenly has 25 sightings or something like that. We use those kinds of things for our test. And what it turned out to be is people probably read a newspaper article that said you could report your UFOs to MUFON or New Fork, okay? And you'd go in there and look at the New Fork in the following days, and they weren't about the sighting that was just happened, but people read the newspaper article, maybe I should report that one I had 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago to New Fork. So they were mostly retro reporting of older sightings because they now knew where to report the stuff. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, so I wanted to ask you, why are they interested in our waste? Because I'm not. I want to stay away from our waste as far as possible.
Well, that's the problem. To use a term my biology teacher once said when I was in high school, that notice the mice in our terrarium. They don't poop in their nest. Ah. Okay, we're pooping in our nest when you think about it. Okay. And we're using up our planet. And hey, we're already got eyes on going to other planets a couple of light years away. Gee, maybe we're going to use this one, make this one the garbage dump. We can go there. Not a very good mindset. And I think he's kind of ticked about that. The last item was generational effect. The number one county in the country for sightings is Los Angeles County, California, not the city.
Which surprises me. I'm just going to throw that out while you keep talking.
Because you're probably thinking light pollution, right?
Yeah.
Okay, downtown, absolutely. Downtown LA is only number 25 in the country. The county is a huge area. And also some of it goes up, it's suburbs, and it goes up into the mountains. Remember what I said, the majority of the sightings occur in the suburbs, the bedroom communities, the unincorporated communities further out, and the rural communities further out in the county. That's where it all happens. In fact, if I do a chart for you from 1 o'clock in the morning to midnight, and then I put a row of zip codes for that county down the side, the major city has all these sightings all day long type of thing, and the rest of it is empty till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we start seeing sightings in those things, but they end up usually adding up to more than the major city had.
As I say, I just pulled up a map. Let's see. And there's a big, so there's Los Angeles on the south chunk, and then there's a Angeles National Forest, which fills the middle third, and then there's a strip above it that's about the same size. So I could see where there's 2/3, approximately, give or take with my quick math here, that are on major metropolitan area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. I'm not surprised now, because I thought the city was the county. So
yeah, a lot of people did. In fact, I had a lot of MUFON investigators calling me up. Oh, wait a minute, they got the light pollution. That's impossible. I'll give you one more. Number 2 county is Maricopa County, Arizona. Okay, and they're the number 2 county. In fact, downtown Phoenix. Get your pencils out, kids. Zip code 85001 is the hottest zip code in the country for UFO sightings. It's got like 500 more than the next zip code.
Wow.
Okay, for that 20-year period. Okay, and I've had television producers come to me, hey, we want to go someplace that's like the real hot spot and set up our cameras and just wait for them, And I said, even with Maricopa County, it's only 5 or 6 a month.
Well,
so you're still going to burn up your producer's credit card, sitting on a penthouse waiting for these guys to come, but the deal is with that generational effect. Mom and Dad, Grandpa told us about the Battle of LA in February 1942. Maybe if we look up, we'll see something. Mom and Dad saw the Phoenix Lights in 1997. Maybe if we look up, we'll see something. There's a folk cultural imperative to look up more often because something cool happened there once.
I was going to say, I'm surprised that many people are looking up these days, honestly, because I find myself looking down more than I used to as I hold my phone in my hand. I guess that.
But also
that audio clue didn't work for you.
Well, no, but think about it. Remember what we were saying? It's leisure time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what do we got? And most of those numbers are up around bedtime. Taking the dog for a walk, that last walk, taking a dog for a walk and having that last cigarette, having maybe a nightcap with the old lady out on the back deck. It's that type of thing. And by the way, dog walkers and smokers are the ones that go outside are considered reliable observers because they're out all the time. They know the lay of the land. I talked to MUFON investigators, and this one chief investigator told me that when he looks at a month's worth of sightings, he scans a text scan for smoke and dog. Okay. Very reliable observers. They're out there. Yeah. And the other people who are out there a lot is people coming out from like everything from Bible study, they come out in the parking lot. Hey, honey, look at that, that kind of thing, to people coming out for a smoke, like mid-shift, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. There was a spike in the hourly chart for Arkansas. I was speaking at the Ozarks conference a couple of years ago. And I couldn't explain this bump at 3 o'clock in the morning. I knew there was a bump at 5. Everybody has this bump at 5 o'clock. It's probably the first dog walk. It's probably the first smoke outside. It's shoveling the snow off the car. It's all that kind of stuff, right? Just before you get out into
Yeah.
traffic. But the bump at 3, I couldn't explain. And 12 guys came down. They were almost all wearing jeans or coveralls. And they said, well, we grow a lot of chickens here in Arkansas, and 3 o'clock in the morning is when we prep our birds to go to market. You got to be outside. Okay. So it was,
that local knowledge is helpful, because otherwise you would never found that on a Google search.
yeah. And there was a goofy thing with Alaska. Okay. And this is how we discovered this Hours of Darkness thing. Alaska, their summer season, it's a warm season, but it's white nights. It's light all the time. And that's their period from about May through the end of August is the worst time. It's like totally tanks. There's almost no sightings. Okay. In Alaska. Nevada. You look at that chart from 1 o'clock in the morning to midnight across the chart. There's a bump at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and 4 o'clock in the morning in Clark County, Nevada. I sent that chart out to an investigator out there and says, can you explain that to me? And she comes back, oh yeah, that's when the clubs and the shows let out. Again, you got to be outside.
Right.
So you come out from the club, hey, honey, look at that. So there's a lot of the serendipitous aspect with that kind of thing.
Okay, hold on a second. Let's do this. Shifting Gears brought to you by
Sure.
evergreenpodcast.com. Shifting Gears brought to you by evergreenpodcast.com. Okay. Now that I did my promo, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do yours. Where can people find the books and find you and all the, you know what I'm talking about now.
Yeah. I gave up having a website. I used to have a very nice one, had my own domain, CherylCosta.com. It's long gone. Hackers took me apart. After White Book came out, we had our webpage taken apart 3 different times. I had a Japanese boutique firm pirate my account, and they were running their entire database out of my website. I thought I was getting all these great page views and things like that. No, they were running a catalog out of my website.
Oh.
Okay. So I gave up on that. Basically, anymore these days, I just point people at, you can, if you want to talk to me, get on Twitter. It's Costa-Writer. I'm easy to find. If you want to buy our books, go to Amazon. We do exclusively self-publish through Amazon. We have got our own publishing company here. My wife is our editor and publishing expert. She did that for the government, so she knows what she's doing. And so you go to Amazon, put Costa UFO, Costa space UFO, you'll find our books. Now, you can find the reference books, that type of thing, or my book of the book called The UFO Beat, which is 38 of my 238 of my newspaper columns that I wrote. That's good. Now, our UFO desk references, the White Book, UFO sightings desk reference 2001 to 2015 and 2001 to 2020, the Pink Book. I warn you right now, there are no stories in it. It is our research. It is charts, graphs, and numbers, and data tables for every single state down to the county level. I've had people buy the desk reference thinking it was a catalog of sighting stories. It is not a book of stories. If you want stories by my UFO Beat, it's my column. I tell lots of stories. Now, the last thing about that, with the books we just produced back starting last Halloween to December 27th, we published 50 individual state books with detail down to the zip code and village level for each individual state. Okay, and they're sensibly priced. The smaller states, it was only about $12. It's pretty much the cost of printing. And then the bigger states like California and the top 10 states, they might have gotten edged up towards $18, but they're dirt cheap. And they go right down to the zip. You'll find your county, find your zip code, and if your village or your burg had sightings, it will be there, and it will show whatever shapes were there, and going across 20 years, how many of them they had. No stories, so it's just statistics. Okay. I've had hate mail before come to me and say, this is nothing but charts, graphs, and numbers, so.
Well,
But if you want to find that series of books, go up on the Amazon. You can find it just by doing cost of UFO. But if you want to get right to it, go in and type like UFO. What state are you in?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So you type UFOs, plural, in Pennsylvania and where to find them. We kind of named it after Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. So every single book is named UFOs in da 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 and where to find them. So you go in there, type UFOs in Pennsylvania and and where to find them, and it'll take you right to our book for that state, and they'll have it to you in 2 or 3 days.
So I've got to ask this question because I've got a Canadian listener chomping at the bit to know this answer. No Canadian books yet?
I strictly do USA. I had I couldn't get Canadian information. Now I could if I wanted to, because National UFO Reporting Center has completely redone their database, and they've actually got a column now. Not only can they give you the state, they can give you the countries that people were filing other countries. It may not be complete, but it would give you a picture. There's a guy by the name of Rosnowski up in, I think he's in Manitoba. He is my equivalent up there. If anybody can tell you the numbers up in Canada, he can. I don't know if he's published all this stuff yet or not, but he's my equivalent up there.
He's working on it, at least. That's the key. At least somebody's working on it.
Oh, yeah. I've had people ask me, they wanted me to map Europe. I did try to reach out and try to get the access to the databases. And we had language problems, and there weren't that many volunteer organizations like MUFON and NUFORC doing it in those other countries.
What was that name again?
Which one?
The Canadian guy who's doing your work.
Chris Rosnowski. I'll tell you. I'll capture his name off my Facebook, and I'll send it to you later.
Sounds good, because I have no chance of getting that one right. No.
Yeah. He's a sharp guy. He's a professor. He's a really sharp guy. I like him a lot.
So the fun question I've got for you now, because how many UFO sightings do you think go unreported? I mean, you said you had 150 counties where the internet wasn't great, so nobody reports. So, I mean, there's probably a couple thousand there, but what do you think?
There was a poll in 2017 done by Fox Pictures, a similar poll done 2 years later by the Gallup organization, and they asked the same questions, and they came back with 36% believe in UFOs, 45% are on the fence, and 15% think it's all hogwash. Okay, that's pretty much what the polls did. But Fox and Gallup asked an additional question, and that question was, have you ever seen a UFO? And based on their data, they came back with a ratio of 16.74% of adult Americans have reported a UFO, or have seen a UFO, not reported. Well, that works out to 43,289,000
That's a lot.
Americans, and it doesn't jive with 167,632 reports between two databases.
It's a little off. I'm not good at math, but I heard hundreds of thousands versus millions. So
yes. So I played with it. Now, the old folk rule of thumb in the UFO community, especially when I first started writing my column, I was kind of new into the actual wading into the actual UFO community. And I asked people, how many do what, like this. And people said the rule of thumb seems to be 1 in 10. You had guys in barbershops asking their people. They had, people in hair salons asking people, and they kept coming back with this 1 in 10. But the numbers don't jive there either.
Yeah, so 1 in 10 and 330 million still way higher.
Doesn't work. So I asked it. I really pressed one investigator. He says 1 in 10 sees one, and 1 in 10 of them reports one. I've worked the numbers. It still doesn't work.
You're getting closer,
Okay.
though.
No, you aren't.
No?
No, not even close.
Uh-oh.
Trust me. I've worked the numbers a couple of
I do
different
trust you.
ways.
It just seems like you're getting closer, though. But
No, you aren't. So, what we determined was, again, adult Americans and our 167,632. When you tried to do it just against the state, it didn't look right. Okay. So I went to each individual state, got their adult population, and ran the numbers from how many sightings they had against their adult population. And what we ended up with was a bell curve. At one end, it was like 1 in 150 people. At the other end, 1 in 475 people. And up at the top, it on that bell curve was up in the 250, 257, something like that. So the number we publish is 1 in 257 people reports what they see. And the numbers keep holding up.
that's interesting. So, okay, so we kind of talked a little bit before the show, and you mentioned you've been into the paranormal and the spiritual side of things. Now, I have a question for you, because you've been deep in the UFO world for a while, and you've been through the other stuff. I found that most people either have the one experience with either the ghost, the Bigfoot, or the UFO, or have the trifecta of all three. I have yet to find anybody with two.
I don't look for them.
But have you noticed when people are telling you stories, they always have more and more paranormal stories, or is it always just
the people who have a lot of sightings or have a lot of these experiences usually have some paranormal gift? Okay. That I did find. Okay. I have found that people who have had lots of UFO sightings, I find usually that they also are been touched experiencer. They've been touched by ET. Okay. I used to, at one point in our column, I was about 3 years into our column, and every now and then I'd get an invitation to come over to some backyard barbecue. And I was afraid there was a lynch mob over there or something, So I took one of our security guards to go over there with me. And we get over there and find out it's really a backyard barbecue. So within about a minute, I got a beer and a burger in my hand. So, okay, fine, And then they take me aside and say, hey, we want you to meet our Uncle Ralph. He was in World War II in B-17s and he saw Foo Fighters, Or, they do things like that. In 2 cases, the matriarch of the family took me aside after we had social time with the family outside, took me aside and opened up like a family album. And in both cases, both families had been touched for upwards of 4 to 5 generations by ET. So as if ET was taking samples about every generation. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you left me speechless there, which isn't a good thing for a radio host. Radio show host to be is speechless. What percentage of UFO sightings are anomalous or misidentified?
Okay, let's go a different way on that.
Okay.
Researchers typically, Dr. Villay said 80% is noise of the sightings.
Okay.
MUFON investigators go with about 70%. Linda and Cheryl, we used different criteria. We came up with 68%. For the sake of argument, we say let's keep 30% and throw 70% away. We don't know what 70%, but for statistical purposes, right, we're going to say what 30% would be. Okay. Now, I actually wrote an op-ed piece for a newspaper today. Okay. And I used this 30% number, but I also, when the ONDI report came out, remember they talked about they had like this 506 sightings, but they narrowed it down to only 171 were unexplained.
Yeah.
Well, that 171 was 33.5. So in the op-ed piece, I do my 30% numbers, and then I do it again using the 33.5 that ONDI had, okay, against the national numbers. So of 167,632, if we take Throw 70% away. That leaves us with 30%. That's 50,289 for 20 years. An average of 2,500 a year, 210 a month, and about 4 per week. Okay. Now, think carefully here. That's 210 starships coming to the United States every month for the 240 months of 20 years. Now, if that doesn't knock the wind out of you, nothing will.
I was gonna say that's still that number seems really high to me. Well, I mean, okay, it's legitimate, but you know what I'm saying, like, you know what I'm saying, like when you think,
no,
you think about.
I know what you're saying. Okay, give me 1 second here. I gotta get a certain page in front of me here. I did the numbers for using the ONDI numbers. Okay. But 33% is illustrate for the article. Here it is. Okay, for them, using their numbers, it would have been. See, you never have this stuff in front of you. Okay.
Well, you're close though.
Okay, 33.5% of that 167,000 would be 5,600, for 20 years. It would be 2,800 per year. 234 per month, 54 per week, and 7 per day. That's one a day. Okay. But again, some people say, oh, that's still too many, Cheryl. Okay. All right. Let's throw 99% away.
Yeah.
Keep 1%. Okay. All right. That works out to 1,676 for 20 years, 84 per year, and 7 per month. Now, if those are the real thing, then we've got 7 starships a month coming here for the last 240 months of 20 years. That's still something to write home about.
I was gonna say that's still mind-blowing because you think, like, I think one, right, buzzes over and a bunch of people see it. You know, that's, I mean, you're talking almost eating an air traffic controller level of traffic.
Yes. Now, I'll give you a flavor to that. One story that I wrote from 1947, done by some observers, looking through a telescope high up in the atmosphere. And then, you remember when the New York Times broke the ATIP story in December of 2017?
Yep.
Okay. That article is still up in the New York Times. If you go back into their archives and you watch it, don't worry about looking at the gimbal. Listen very carefully to the pilots talking. There's one point when the pilot locks up. Hey, I locked onto him. Yay. That's great. And one of them says, yeah, wow, look at him go. And then the other pilot says, oh my God, look up there. There's a whole fleet of them. Okay. Now, the 1947 article was Syracuse University, February of 1947. This is 5 months before Roswell. It was February in Syracuse, New York. 2 guys had just left a dining hall. They were going to their dormitory, and they were going past the Holden Observatory. The Holden Observatory on campus is this very Gothic rock building with, it's clearly 19th century architecture. And they could see the telescope moving around in the open hole. The door was open because those things can't be heated. Okay. And they walked in to see what was going on. And this professor was walking back and forth with the telescope, looking at something. And he realized that these kids were there. He says, come here, you got to see this. And he had each one look up at this thing. He'd get it in position, have them look up. And he says, tell me what you saw. After they both had looked, and he says, there was all these wedge-shaped craft up there. He said, yeah, I thought I was crazy. You saw them too. And they are the same shape that was described by Mr. Arnold, who reported them. First guy reported them out there in Washington State many months later, and they coined the term flying saucer. Okay. But they've been here in droves for a long time.
So I guess my last serious
Mm-hmm.
question,
Mm-hmm.
because I have one more very lighthearted question.
I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. Is this disclosure thing's been, beat around and beat death up one side down the other. I think we're always going to get drips. Do you agree with that, or do you see somebody finally coming clean and saying, yes, there's been thousands of actual sightings, and we're not hiding it anymore?
People for too long figured the government knew all about it. Dr. Condon shut off all the funds unless it was in a dark program. Okay, Dr. Condon shut off all that money back when he gave his talk to Congress back in 1968. So when we were getting up here, after part of the reason the guys on the Nimitz couldn't get anybody to pay any attention to what was going on is nobody wanted to touch it. It had a stigma. It was affecting the military just as bad as it was affecting the civilian population. Hey, did you see that UFO? No, and you didn't either. That was the mindset. Do you know when I was doing the Pink Book, the guy at Staples would come up to me when I'd come over to run printing of chapters to see if it was done right. And he would say, you did take all the kooks, nuts, and crackpots out, right? I said, how am I supposed to do that? But his question set me up to coming up with the idea of using percentages as a filter. Okay. So to your question, repeat the question, please.
Are we ever going to get full disclosures? It's just going to keep dripping for the next 100 years.
Okay. Steve Bassett says yes. He says things are being dismantled in the infrastructure of organizational infrastructure that was keeping the secret. You're starting to get congressmen who are getting these briefings saying, and then they're coming out and saying, look up, they're here. Your congressmen are starting to say this stuff, okay? And they're really pushing the military because they didn't like their answers. Look how long it took them to publish the ONDI report.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're struggling with internal stuff. Plus, also, if you talk to Lou Elizondo, okay, and I worked in compartmented work myself in the Navy. There's quite a process of declassifying something, and you got to do it by the book. Okay, so if they're trying to declassify, and some of the stuff may have been pushed off into some dark programs, particularly maybe recovered technology or something like this. And as it is, the ONDI report we got was the unclassified version. We don't know what that classified version looked like.
Well, we'll never know that.
Well, maybe we will. But I'll tell you something. I wrote my congressman in New York State, Senator Schumer, who's now the head of the Senate. Okay, I wrote him for 7 years. He got copies of our books. So did Gillibrand. And Gillibrand ended up being one of the sponsors. Okay, now I'll give you one more. We're almost out of time. Real quick story. I took 2 copies of the book in 2021. I laid them on my couch one morning. I wrote a draft cover letter. 1-page terse cover letter, executive cover letter, just a draft. Linda had to clean it up. And then I generated a report for Rubio. At that time was the head of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and there was a guy from New York that was the head of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. I dumped each of their states down to the zip code and village level. It wasn't clean and perfect, but it was pretty close to what's in these new books. Okay. And I had it printed out up at the copy store, got it bound, and we put it in a package, and he both got a 2-pound package of our Pink Book with data and print out for their individual state right down to the zip code. Okay, we touched them. Okay, and then when they started the talks, Congressman Andre Carson, he got a similar package from me for Indiana. Okay, so it's not like they've never seen the data.
That's good. Hey,
but are we going to get it? I think we will.
Got to wrap you up. Have a good night.
Take care, my friend.
Hey, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been a good show tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Take a few moments, subscribe, share, all the fun stuff. You know how to do it. I don't have to tell you. Just be ready for next week. It'll be sooner than you think.